Hi everyone, I need to talk to you about Venezuela again, because again, we're in a situation where we're being inundated with lies from the mainstream media, this time again from CNN, although New York Times are involved in it as well. Now, just to set this up, I have talked many times about Venezuela and exposed many lies from the mainstream media. For instance, I exposed how Venezuela's election process is exactly the best, is actually the best in the world. It really is. I mean, Jimmy Carter actually said this. President Jimmy Carter, he had this organization which went around checking election integrity. Did a video about it. Fantastic, honestly. I think we should have that process or something similar over in our country in the West, which is possibly why, you know, they don't want to actually tell people about that great election process, because with the it's fantastic. It really is. Go watch the video I did on it. But you know, the media in the UK and the US definitely won't want people knowing that thread of the good idea and all that. We'll want it over here. I certainly do. After finding out, I covered how CNN had lied about some Venezuelan army defectors that they said were defecting from Guaido. Turns out they weren't in the army, weren't defectors, and didn't actually live in Venezuela all along. This is just CNN, just videos I've done on it. The CBS, this is CBS, their anti-Maduro rally, which they showed a massive crowd there, wasn't actually in Venezuela. And you can tell from that statue it was actually in Argentina. They never mentioned that in the article, in the text of the article. And then obviously there was this one that I did recently as well. I scooped the New York Times on that by 10 days. You know, all independent media had scooped the New York Times, me, from my council flat in Wolverhampton. What, I don't know, 6,000 to 7,000 miles away from the New York Times. We're working on a tiny, tiny budget, barely afford to pay my rent. And the New York Times have all got all that money behind them, and it took them 10 days to catch up with me. The media are not to be trusted, obviously, on Venezuela, and this is the latest. This is from antiwar.com. CNN falsely claims Venezuela's Guaido was elected president in January. Never even stood. Continuing to try to advance the US narrative that Venezuela opposition leader Juan Guaido is the, quote, duly elected president, CNN went to the trouble on Sunday afternoon of inventing an entire election to base this around. Just invented the entire election. There wasn't even an election back in January, I don't think. In the CNN report, they declared, quote, pressure is mounting on Maduro to step down following elections in January in which voters chose opposition leader Juan Guaido over him for president. That never actually existed. Never happened. There wasn't even an election. He's never. I don't think he's ever stood for president. I think he stood for the National Assembly, never for president. In reality, Venezuela's president's election was held on May the 20th, 2018, last year. I covered it. The opposition boycotted the vote. Maduro won with 67.8% of the vote, while Guaido did not participate at all. Covered it. Independent media covered it. They said that they had boycotted because they could then paint it out as, oh, look, nobody stood, therefore it's an election with no integrity. It's a fixed election, it's a rigged election. And that's what they said in all the media, rigged, fixed. Indeed, the only time Juan Guaido participated in a presidential vote of any kind was the 2012 Democratic Unity's roundtables. I knew he didn't last year, which he lost. Juan Guaido's first claim to the presidency came in January 2019 when he unilaterally declared himself acting president. Yet the Trump administration not only endorsed Guaido as leader of presidents at the time, I can't see the rest because of my my logos on it, but you see my point. Alan McLeod picked this up. Alan McLeod, great journalist. Follow him on Twitter. Read his work, he's great. Terrible journalism from CNN. I don't think you could even class what journalism are doing as CNN now. 6 journalists wrote that article that antiwar.com are referencing. 6. 2 senior staff writers and 4 of the journalists. 2 senior staff writers. I'll get this in a minute. Pressure is clearly falling from Maduro. Juan Guaido has never stood for president. Well, we found out that he has in 2012, thanks to anti-war. The elections were in May 2018. Maduro got 68%, that's correct. What happened in January was a coup attempt, not an election. Now you can see the line. It comes as pressure is mounting from Maduro to step down following elections in January, in which voters chose opposition leader Juan Guaido over him for president. All lies. Here's the article. Military helicopter crashes in Venezuela, killing 7 amid protest. There's the 2 lead items. Like I say, 6. 6. I'm barely conscious most of the day. I'm high most of the day on really good quality cannabis. I'm surviving on rice and beans, basically. Can hardly afford to pay my rent. And I can report on Venezuela factually correct. CNN have got a fortune behind them, are owned by a massive blue chip company, had 6 writers writing this and factually got it fucking wrong. Wow. Just want to go down to here at the correction at the end. I want to know the correction. They have corrected this. Correction. An earlier version of this story incorrectly described how Juan Guaido came to be Venezuela's self-declared president. No, even the correction is wrong. An earlier version of the story incorrectly described how Juan Guaido came to Venezuela's self-declared president. No, you described how he won an election. You factually said that he was involved in an election that didn't even exist. They are liars, is what they are. Fair and accuracy in reporting. Did a brilliant job on this, on Venezuela. They've actually talked about something else as well. They're talking, this is on May the 7th. Failed coup, a fake corporate news story designed to trick Venezuelan soldiers and the US public. That's exactly what it did. It tricked Venezuelan soldiers. I'm going to read a bit of this because it goes on to talk about a New York Times article as well, which I'm going to get to, just to show you it's not just CNN. It's all of the news. It's definitely all of the news in America, and for Christ, it's definitely the news over here as well. After days of breathless reporting in the United States media about public and military support for Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro collapsing and about an April 30th coup by presidential poser Juan Guaido, I think poser Juan Guaido, sorry, we know the truth. The whole thing was a fraud staged at the instigation of Washington in hopes that the Venezuelan people and rank and file troops would fall for the trick and think an actual coup was underway. This is exactly what happened. This is why there was only a handful of people who would supposedly turn against Maduro in the army. They were tricked. We also know from an excellent May the 2nd report by Michael Fox in The Nation magazine that the US mainstream media and its reporters in the country were promoting that dangerous fraud. That's exactly what they were doing. Take CNN in its reporting of the uprising announced by Juan Guaido on Tuesday, April the 30th. It ran a video from social media depicting Guaido accompanied by an opposition leader, Leopoldo Lopez, who they sprung out of prison. There's the picture. Okay? Along with some armed men in uniform, said to be military defectors standing behind them. I remember it. I remember the news ticker saying, breaking news, Juan Guaido is at a base and he's rallied troops. They made it sound like he'd taken control of this base. It wasn't so, as we're about to find out. The video claimed that they were on La Carlota military airfield in eastern Caracas, with Guaido said he'd been liberated, which Guaido said had been liberated. According to CNN, he was addressing thousands of reporters on the scene, urged the rest of the Venezuelan military to join the coup and oust the usurper Maduro. I remember it. As you no doubt do too. But as Michael Fox and other observers noted, CNN didn't show those thousands of supporters because there were none. They lied, in other words. Nor did the cable network explain in its report that Guaido and Lopez were not actually at the airbase. What a surprise. But rather was standing on a highway overpass outside the base, which was in fact never in rebel hands at all. Yeah, I'm going to go to RAF Cosford up the road, and I'm going to go live from an overpass outside. I'm going to say, yes, I'm here. I'm going to find some dumbass who works, in the storeroom at RAF Cosford to say, oh, we're going to have a coup. I'd be shot on sight. That CNN are cheering it on and lying about it. Guaido and his deserting soldiers quickly left the scene as government troops headed their way, with Lopez later that day holding up in the Chilean and eventually the Spanish embassy seeking asylum for himself and his family. And with some 24 soldiers who had deserted in support of Guaido asking for asylum in the Brazilian embassy. There are two possibilities here. Either CNN's US-based editors were lied to by their reporters in Caracas, or they were well aware that their story of the takeover of a military airfield, along with reports of thousands of protesters on the scene of support of Guaido, was a hoax. I suggest it's probably a bit of both. It's not hard to imagine the latter being the truth, because CNN earlier was caught fraudulently reporting that Venezuelan troops had set aid trucks stopped at the Colombian border afire. I've talked about that myself, done a video on it as I mentioned earlier. When in fact the fires had been started by the anti-Maduro possessors, as I'd reported. Though this was proven by other reports and video, CNN never corrected its full story in that case, nor did it discipline its on-the-scene reporters. That's not a journalism outfit. It's not a journalistic outfit. They're not even applying standard journalistic practice. You get something wrong, you apologise, you edit, you state what you got wrong, and you leave the correction up there. They're not doing it anymore. None of them are. CNN, The Guardian, none of them. It's basic. Even the BBC I've caught doing it. It's basic journalistic practice, and they're not doing it. Why? Because they don't want to be shown as being caught out as lying. I'll continue with this because he goes on to talk. There's the Alan McLeod tweet. CNN's standards of accuracy were further discredited by its May the 5th claim that, quote, pressure is mounting on Maduro to step down following elections in January, which voters chose to opposition leader Guaido over him for president. 6 reporters were credited for the story. It actually only has 2 at the top here, but it says there CNN's Philip Brown, Claudia Dominguez, Sandra Sanchez and Natalie Gallon contributed to that report along with 2 staff writers. So either those 6 people, fair and accuracy in reporting are saying there, either they know what they're doing is propaganda and lies and putting it out anyway, or they're totally inept and totally clueless as to what is going on in Venezuela, but apparently they're the people that are best qualified to educate the world on what is actually going over there. It's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. I'll continue with this then. So, as it says, 6 reporters were credited for the story that contained this line, which has almost as many errors. Guaido was not even a candidate in the May 2018, nor not January 2019 presidential elections. Maduro won the race with 68% of the vote, a credible total given the opposition's boycott of the balloting. Guaido was not chosen was chosen not by voters, but by the National Assembly, which has been suspended by the Venezuelan Supreme Court and ultimately by the Trump administration. As for pressure mounting on Maduro, that seems like a dubious reading indeed of the post-coup attempt political terrain. After much social media ridicule, CNN corrected the line, keeping in a bit about mounting pressure, but acknowledged that Guaido declared himself interim president. Like I said, I showed the correction. This is the bit I want to get onto, though, because the New York Times are no better. Honestly, the New York Times, Washington Post, Guardian, Independent, a lot of them, they're no better. They're lying to you about Venezuela. If they're not, I'll tell you the truth at the end of this. I'll tell you the truth. And the fact that then they do not report this one thing that I'll tell you at the end of this video will show you just how much of a bunch of lying bastards they are. The New York Times hasn't done any better. On the day of this fake coup, the Times reported in an unusual unbylined article at the end where there was a note only saying the reporting was contributed by, etc., headed Venezuela crisis, Guaido calls uprising as clashes erupt. It said, today, brave soldiers, brave patriots, brave men attached to the Constitution have followed our call, Mr. Guaido said in a video posted on social media, speaking from Generalissimo Francisco de Miranda Air Base, a military airport in Caracas known as La Carlota. The newspaper of record either made no effort to check its reporters' quote facts or went along deliberately with the channels that Washington's hand-picked legitimate President Guaido was actually speaking from a liberated military airfield, when he was really only standing on a highway overpass out there outside the airfield, which itself was never even contested, remaining in government hands throughout the day. So the Times have done it as well. To compound the journalistic felony, the Times ran a Reuters wire photo showing Guaido speaking to a street full of supporters purportedly taken that day, but clearly not depicting where he had made his call for a coup, when he had only the camera to address, though incautious readers might well have assumed that this is what the photo showed. Of course, it's all about representation. They did this all the time with Theresa May. You might remember in the run-up to the 2017 election. You know, they were showing her. They were showing, and with a crowd of people behind her, but when the camera actually panned back, which it didn't do, you only saw this from other people. There were 20 people there, and they would crowd them all in to make it look like there was a massive crowd there. And meanwhile, Jeremy Corbyn was talking to thousands. They do it all the time. But there's another thing that they go on to talk about in this article with regards to the New York Times, because this was the article that they're talking about. Venezuela opposition leader steps up pressure, but Maduro holds on. They highlight a couple of errors there. Look what they put at the top here. They've put a video at the top. What my fellow liberals don't get about Venezuela. And it's 5 minutes long, and it's by Joanna Houseman, who's apparently a Venezuelan comedian and YouTuber. They put that at the top. She's a Venezuelan comedian and YouTuber, is she? I'd never heard of her. Perhaps the reason that she was picked was because her father is Ricardo Houseman, apparently. And as Mid-Press News have said, did the New York Times violate its own code of ethics and feature a child of a Venezuelan coup plotter? Turns out, yes, that's exactly what they did. The New York Times. The New York Times, the paper of note, the newspaper of note, the paper of record in the United States, is literally propagandizing their people with the daughter of one of these people who are plotting the coup in Venezuela. They're lying to you, to your faces. The mainstream media and the media are lying to you. We're not, but they're the ones with all the money. If you really want to find out what is going on in Venezuela, it's not difficult to find. People like her, people like me will tell you, but we go to what we know are trusted sources on the ground. Here's Venezuela analysis. Report. This is the thing. This is the thing that they're not going to tell you. In the media in this country, the BBC won't tell you. The CNN won't tell you. MSNBC won't tell you. Honestly, in America, you've got more chance of Fox telling you this. You've got more chance of Tucker Carlson telling you this than fucking the Washington Post. US sanctions have cost 40,000 Venezuelan lives. Just for a second, just think. If something Maduro had done to his own people in the last year or so had cost 40,000 lives, do you think they would have run with that fucking headline? You're damn sure they would. But no, they leave this out. And the reason why my subscribers will tell you that this is a damn good report and one to be trusted is because it was by economist Mark Weisbrot and Jeffrey Sachs. They concluded that US sanction would fit the definition of collective punishments. Kill 40,000 people. Jeffrey Sachs, by the way, you might remember him. This was him on YouTube. Loads of independent media did a video about this because we couldn't believe it. They had Jeffrey Sachs on, who is obviously, you know, a professor and a learned man, and they thought he was going to follow the establishment line on Syria. He didn't. Listen to what he said.
And we know they sent in the CIA to overthrow Assad.
Look at their faces. And the thing is, he's telling them here something that's happening in Syria, that, you know, the Americans instigated this coup attempt in Syria with Assad that happened over the last few. This is just what, last year, isn't it? In 2018. And he's gone on there and he's going to tell them this is Operation Timber Sycamore. He's going to tell them to the faces. And none of them are going to say, oh, what's that? What's Operation Timber? What's that? We're actually funding ISIS and Al Qaeda. We are. Our taxpayer money is funding ISIS and Al Qaeda in Syria. Yes, and the British as well. We're doing it. Operation Timber Sycamore.
CIA and Saudi Arabia together in covert operations tried to overthrow Assad. It was a disaster. Eventually it brought in both ISIS as a splinter group to the jihadists that went in. It also brought in Russia. So we have been digging deeper and deeper and deeper What we should do now is get out.
Now, he was saying that last year. He went on to explain in that video about Operation Timber Sycamore, but he went on to explain that last year, get out. You think they've had him on again since? I haven't seen. You told me. I can't say for sure they might have. But I'm assuming that they haven't, because he went on there and told too much truth. They're not going to have people on the mainstream media and in these establishment rags. They're not going to have people telling you the truth. Independent media, we tell you the truth. We do. We need your help there, because it costs money. These people have got everything going for them, and they're still getting it wrong and losing viewers. We've got everything going against us, and independent media is still growing at a rapid rate. Everything is going against us. And the reason is, we give you the truth and they give you the propaganda. Please support independent media where you can. Even if it's just $1, $2 a month, every little bit helps. Please make sure you're still subscribed as well, because they will unsubscribe you. They do it every day. Thanks very much for your support, and I'll be back in probably about an hour with another story. Thanks very much. Till next time. Peace. Take care.